Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of From the Trenches. This is the show where my esteemed colleague James Boyle and myself, we bring you behind the scenes at Plan First Wealth as we are working with our clients and building this business. Hi James.
How's it going, Richard?
It's baking hot.
I was going to say the same
cooking,
thing.
Yeah.
We are in the middle of a hot and humid heat wave here.
We are trapped in the heat dome apparently,
Yes.
and boy does it feel like a heat dome. So thunderstorms tomorrow, so hopefully I'll clear it. Anyway, James, we are going to slightly change things up a little bit. Rather than leading with the markets this time, we've had a conversation. We've decided to lead with some of the stories that we've accumulated since we last spoke on dealing with clients and prospective clients. And the reason we're doing this is because the whole point of this show is to bring some of the more technical aspects to life. So the other show format that I do, which is I call Ask an Expert, where I bring a technical expert, a tax advisor, a tax lawyer, an insurance person, whoever it might be. I bring someone technical on to share some information with us that we think is valuable for expats and Brits in America. But then you and I are really at the point where the rubber meets the road. Like we are often the people who spot these issues, who encounter them for the first time, who make people aware of them for the first time, or just help people get organised and maximise their opportunity here. It's not all landmines. There are also opportunities. And the whole point of this show is to kind of bring that part of it to life. So, what have we encountered, and how does that relate to some of the topics we go through? So we're gonna switch up the order here, and we're going to start with some of our client stories.
Yep, we want to make sure it's as relevant as possible to our audience, right? And having real stories, right? We're doing this day in, day out, week in, week out. We hope that helps bring it to light. Sometimes we're the translator, right? You mentioned the Ask an Expert episode.
Perfect.
Can be very technical, obviously really good, high quality information, but with that comes some level of complexity that, to the extent we can, we'll try to translate, make it a bit more palatable.
I'm acutely aware of it. Some of it's heavy.
Yep.
And, sometimes I'll be in the middle of an episode and I know it's getting heavy. I've just recorded another one with a tax attorney, Virginia Latoya Yeager. And at the point, I'm at points where I'm like, this is too heavy. But I can't stop asking questions because I do find it kind of both fascinating and sometimes utterly demoralising.
That tends to be the pattern.
Welcome to cross-border world, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's heavy, and I guess it's quite abstract as well to people sometimes.
Yep.
And a big part of this show, which I think maybe we've moved away from, is to try and bring it into the real light, so people can say, you know what, that's me. Maybe it's spotting a landmine, which sounds scary, but is good because that gives you the opportunity to clean it up before it becomes a bigger problem. Or maybe it's, I'm not taking advantage of all the opportunities because no one is. There's an opportunity cost to leaving that there. And maybe we can help people that way as well. So that's the objective here. That's what we're trying to do.
And we'll keep saying this throughout the episode. We want this to be a dialogue with the audience. So if you like the new format, shoot us a message. And if you think we could be improved or you have ideas what we should be covering, we always want to hear the feedback.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, good. Right, so I will start with a story I've had recently, an encounter, shall we say. I met with a prospective client, and they had moved to the US 3 years ago. And as lots of Brits coming to America, or lots of Brits full stop do, they had a UK pension that's in a SIP, and they had an ISA portfolio, a substantial ISA portfolio. We're talking hundreds of thousands of pounds in an ISA portfolio.
Now when we hear that, we hear red flag. I won't step on your story here, but immediately start
ringing.
Yep, Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. And long story short, the no surprise at all, I don't think 3520 and 3520A is being filed for the SIP. Extremely common. But there's penalty issues with that. But there's no actual tax issues possibly. It's mainly about it's penalties. The ISA though, and this is where it gets interesting. They had spoken to someone before they left the UK or done some research, and they had learned that mutual funds, non-US mutual funds, were a problem. Non-US ETFs were a problem So they didn't know what a PFIC was. They hadn't heard of PFICs, but they were aware that they couldn't have mutual funds. So what they did was they sold, before they moved to America, they sold out of their mutual funds and they reinvested in the UK what we call listed investment trusts. And an investment trust is simply a collective investment. It's a mutual fund, but rather than using a mutual fund wrapper, it's a company. It's a limited company basically, or a PLC, whatever. But it's still, they're in the business of buying and selling securities to make a profit. Yeah. It's a collective investment. It doesn't go by NAV. It goes by the market price of the company. And that most of those, as I understand it, still fall under the PFIC classification. PFIC, for those who are not listening, stands for Passive Foreign Investment Company. I did a podcast on this with Brian Dunhill not so long ago. I can't remember what the episode number is, but if you look for Brian Dunhill, essentially the US does not like non-US mutual funds, ETFs, what they call collective investments, and to discourage investment in them, there are the PFIC rules, and they add reporting requirements, like onerous reporting requirements, and the tax burden is significant.
Harsh.
Tax and interest burden, way higher than capital, way higher. So this person had done a bit of research, learned that mutual funds were a problem, hadn't learned what PFICs were, and switched out of a mutual fund into an investment trust, in thinking he'd dodged the problem, but in fact he'd gone from one PFIC to another.
There's so much to unpack here. It's a great example of the conversations we have, but this is almost, I don't know, more heartbreaking, right? Because there was some level of action taken, there was some advice received and digested, but the inherent complexity of these things means that at the finish line, there was a stumble, and unfortunately, it's going to cause issues. And
well, he had it's a 50-piece jigsaw. Mm-hmm. And he had 5 pieces, and he put 2 of them in the wrong place.
Yeah.
And do you know what? It sounds awful, right? Because now, he has an ISA. And bear in mind, there's no need to have the ISA. This guy is not going back to the UK. There's no need to have the ISA. There's no benefit to it in America. So it's taxable in America. It would be, if he'd got it into tax-free, non-PFIC investments, it would have had a lower tax rate. But it still was not tax-free. So there's not even any purpose to it. And people might be thinking, "Oh, this is terrible. Like, I don't even want to know if I've got this problem." But trust me, you do, because this person's 3 years in, and now there's a problem to solve. You've got to tidy up that 3520. You've got to get into compliance with the ISA, the PFIC reporting, and I would urge them to just clean that up. Pay whatever taxes due in the last 3 years and clean up. Probably means getting out the ISA and bringing it into the US and then moving on. That is a infinitely better situation than realizing in 10 years' time, in 15 years' time, or heaven forbid, the IRS realizing and coming to them with a letter saying, "We think there's some a reporting issue here and an underpayment of tax. What are you going to do about it?" So unpleasant, but it's better to know. It's better to be able to proactively repair this than as soon as possible than have it fester.
3 years, I agree completely. 3 years in the States for the conversations we're having is it's a newcomer, right? For the people we tend to meet and talk with. So in a way, that's the silver lining, so to speak, is an opportunity to be proactive and clean this up. Not a pleasant surprise, right? What a welcome to the United States and our idiosyncratic tax system as it is. But I think you're right. The course of action here is to tidy it up. You do not want that hanging over your head. We use this term landmine, not to be fear mongering, but this is a perfect example of something that, if left unchecked, could blow up or could have blown up in 10, 15, 20 years in the middle of retirement when you have less resources to pay for it, and penalties and fees and headaches and all of the badness that comes with that. It's just a shame.
And these forms missing, the 3520 and the 8621 for the PFICs, they likely mean the statute of limitations clock's not ticking, which means if the IRS do pick up in 10 years' time, they can't just go back 3 years or 6 years. They can if they want, go back 10 years.
There's no real protection, right? You're kind of at the mercy of the IRS at that stage. And
yeah, that's what I was talking to Virginia about. That's what the podcast that's coming out in a few weeks is about, how missing off these forms not only opens you up to penalties, but also means the statute of limitations clock likely remains open indefinitely, which is a frankly terrifying thought.
You know, I can almost tie it back to how we opened today's episode, right? This idea of these are inherently extremely complex, sometimes dry, sometimes burdensome conversations, right? And the knowledge required is incredibly technical and complex. But the reality is these have real world consequences, right? So even though it's unfortunate and even though it's technically complex, it's important that either you understand these things and are prepared to take action, or you find the right advice to do so. This is such a perfect example because I'm sure in this person's mind they had resolved it, right? They had understood there was an issue, right? Maybe sort of amorphous, this vague idea of this is a bad thing. These mutual funds didn't quite know all the technicalities, but thought they had taken actions to resolve it. And unfortunately, in this case, the reality is that they hadn't. The issue still is there.
They'd literally gone out the frying pan into the fire.
Yeah.
I'll add something as well. I don't even know what the point of saying this is, but it's a point I want to make anyway. This is uniquely American.
Yeah.
It's complex, it's idiosyncratic, and it is uniquely American.
And I don't expect things are going to change anytime soon. I mean, our tax code is sort of by design unfriendly to offshore investments, I think is a polite way of putting it, and punitive, right? I mean, we use that term a lot, but it is compared to other tax systems worldwide, and that's unfortunately just the way it is.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else to add to that one?
No, it's an unfortunate story, but they have a path forward at least now.
Yeah, I have another one that's it's completely different, honestly, but I want to raise it because I think it's got value, and that is I don't need to tell you, but anyone who's listening, hopefully they know. We're a full service wealth manager. We manage assets, but we are called Plan First Wealth for a reason. We build financial plans, we manage retirements, we map out into the future, we take care of it all. US, UK, and US, UK, and other stuff as well. And that's what we do for most of our clients. But for some clients, we do just manage a one-off asset, and that's typically when it's something that they need our help with, like a UK pension, So they maybe have a long-standing advisor elsewhere, or they might do their own thing elsewhere, but they need help with this particular asset. And because we often do, not always, but we often do. And I had a client like that, or I have a client like that. Got a great relationship with him, but it's been limited to this one significant non-US asset. And that asset is basically coming to an end. For good reasons, it's coming to an end. And I assumed that would be the end of our working relationship. And so did he, honestly. This is a very successful guy. He's built up a really sizable investment portfolio, partly through earning and saving and partly through making some pretty astute investments in the last 15 years. He's ridden the tech wave, let's say. And we both expected that he was going to retire. He's retired this year. He was going to retire and self-manage his investments. And I spoke to him recently, and he said, "Look, we should talk about. I want to understand more about what you guys do for clients in retirement, because I've retired and I just assumed I was going to carry on doing this, and frankly, I don't want to." I don't want to spend my time thinking about this. I don't want the worry. I have done really, really well, but I also recognise I've had a hell of a prevailing wind in the last 15 years, and I don't want to jeopardise this. Now I've turned my income off, and I, frankly, bottom line, I just don't want to do it. And I'm sharing this because this is really, really common. We know lots of people who we actually say accumulation's pretty easy. Can you optimize it? Absolutely, you can always optimize, but it's pretty easy. You try and save as much as you can into your various pots, and you keep working, and then you're earning, and your pots are over here going up and down, and it doesn't feel good when they're going down. It feels great when they're going up, but it's okay because you're earning, and that's paying for your lifestyle. You switch that off, and those pots of money become your front and center, your lifeline. Your relationship to this changes completely.
Enormously.
Completely. And the stakes are so much higher. We call it, there's no plan B. You know, you're not making this up if things go awry. You're going back to work or something. So this guy had felt it immediately, and he just said, look, I'm not feeling this. I don't want to do it. So we're having the conversation. And I share it because I want to give people almost permission to, it's okay. This is really common.
This touches into so many different topics that we talk about with our clients. You're talking about accumulation versus decumulation. Also, not leave aside the complexity of it, the time commitment, the pressure of it when there's no plan B, right? When all of a sudden that income stream, that spigot turns off. A lot of people just don't enjoy it, right? We do this as a profession. I think both of us could say pretty confidently that we really enjoy doing it. We like the numbers. We like putting these plans together. I would say we're in the minority of the general public, right, that has any interest or inkling or enjoyment, particularly when you make that flip, right, when you go from that accumulation where you're just kind of shoveling coal into the fire, and like you said, the furnace is on and you're not really worried about what's going on because you're working and you have income. All of a sudden, when you enter retirement, these decisions take on a whole new world of burden, of responsibility. And at the end of the day, a lot of people say, look, I don't want to be doing this. I'll mention something else that we hear fairly commonly is a partner, a spouse, right? If the worst were to happen, right? Not that we're hoping for this, but very often one person in a relationship, if you're a couple, handles the majority of these things. And the thought of something happening to that person and then the other partner or spouse being essentially without any kind of guidance, right? Or help or knowledge of what to do here. That is a pretty enormous burden as well, emotionally, psychologically. And as you approach retirement, as you enter retirement, naturally your priorities are going to shift. This idea of longevity, of protecting your family, your heirs, takes primacy, right? It starts to take that center stage and say, what can I be doing to make sure that all of my ducks are aligned, all my assets and affairs are organized? That's another common piece that people just say, look, delegate, right? I'd rather have someone in my corner helping me do this.
It also gets more important that all the pieces of the jigsaw have come together. So, I mean, it's always important to have an estate plan, but the older you get, for obvious reasons, the more important it becomes. The older you get, the more likely something is to happen, and obviously the more wealth you have. So there's that, and then there's the tax piece, which is always tax planning, but really tax compliance. Like, you don't want to go into retirement with what I would refer to as undetonated landmines lurking in your affairs, because if they blow up, that's the same thing like going to cash in the down market and not getting back in and missing a recovery. Like, you can blow a hole in your retirement plan very quickly, and there's no plan B. There's no recovering from it.
This idea of income planning, right? Sometimes referred to it, and that can be its own topic, and I'm sure one of these episodes will have a more deep discussion about income planning for our clients. But it touches on so many pieces. Again, leave aside the added responsibility, the complexity, but there is very likely a case for our clients in particular, and this might describe you if you're listening. You will have multiple different tax vehicles, right? In the U.S., call it. You might have a pre-tax account like your 401k or an IRA. You might have a post-tax account like a Roth account. You might have a non-tax advantage account, a brokerage account. All of these things, how are they interplaying? How are you determining where to take income from? How to structure the investments in each of those accounts? That's U.S. only, right? Now for our clients, add complexity of cross-border accounts. So you have U.K. pensions. You might have U.K. income streams. You might have assets or income in different currencies, GBP or euros. All of these things are now adding to this sort of swirling pot of decisions to be made, critical decisions in retirement, to make sure that that spigot we talked about, right? That income that you were used to. How do we replicate that into retirement to satisfy the lifestyle you'd like to live? A lot of people look at that approaching retirement or at retirement or just after sometimes and say, I need some help here. I do not want to be solely responsible for this.
Yeah. And it's okay.
Yep.
It's natural. Yeah, it's okay to think, you know what, I've done this for 30 years, but and I want some help now for a variety of reasons.
Absolutely.
The game changes. The game totally changes. The stakes get higher, but also the game changes. There's more to think about. Income planning is its own thing altogether that you've not had to think about.
You know, I'll make another comment here, and I'm interested to hear your experience with this. So most of the time, in fact, I would say the vast majority of the time, people are coming to us pre-retirement. Usually, you know, we like to say ideal time 3, 5, up to 10 years maybe prior. Occasionally, we do get people who come to us at the cusp. Either they're retiring in a month or they just retired 3 months ago. And in my experience, there's almost this sense of shell shock because they just hadn't, and you can't, right? I mean, we do this professionally. You haven't retired yet. I certainly haven't. But there's this sense of, oh, I didn't realize not only the psychological shift, lifestyle shift, but also all these decisions that waterfall into each other that need to be made that are critical for all the reasons we just discussed. And it's almost this, panic is too strong a word, right? But maybe some level of desperation or something where overload. That's a great.
Yeah, it's just decision overload, like important decision overload, decision fatigue. Yeah, 100% happens. And also, I don't think people are fully emotionally aware of just what a significant switch like retirement is. I mean, it's a life event. It's something you've been working towards for 40 years. And it kind of like weighs on people. It's very exciting. I don't want to detract from that, but I think it's a bigger event than most people realize it is.
You know, I think we're now brainstorming ideas for future experiences we've had or client experience, but that idea of the emotional shift, right, is enormous and something that I think you're right that number one, it's really difficult to anticipate that or know what it's going to be like, and then when you're in the throes of it, when it's put upon you, the stress and again this kind of burden is magnified. You know, you see these studies every once in a while, and I don't have one at hand here, but the most stressful events in people's lives, right? And there's kind of the common ones that everyone knows: having a child, moving house, job change, retirement is always in that top 5 area, right? That level of seismic shift. You've been working 30, 35, 40 years. You know, you might have a 9 to 5 that you're used to doing for all that time to then remove that structure. It's a big life change, to say the least.
Should we talk about what's going on in the world?
Let's do it.
Let's
do it. Markets, where are we at? Well, everyone knows Fed meeting. So I should say we're recording this on the morning of July 30th. Fed meets today. I think it's pretty much unanimous that rates are going to stay the same.
We're in a weird time though, where rates are staying the same. The Trump administration, or Trump himself, is pushing hard. I mean, like really hard. I mean, you've seen the video at the Fed, the building site, right? That was a piece of that was something to see. Trump wants rates to come down. The housing market certainly needs rates to come down. But now people are also starting to worry inflation's going up and interest rates might even go up.
I think
they need to come down.
I think it's pretty obvious we've seen some softening in the labor markets. Obviously, not yet tipping over, I think, into flashing red signals, but a trend of lower job openings, lower jobs created. But on the flip side, consumer spending has been strong. Obviously, we're in the midst of earnings season here, and a lot of major companies still yet to report. But it seems okay right now. I mean, GDP came in stronger than expected, so I think you're right that the Fed is kind of between a rock and a hard place and waiting to see what the impact of tariffs are versus a potentially softening labor market. the S&P, I know everyone uses that as a bellwether, is at all-time highs, right? We're up I think it's 8.32% on the year after all of the volatility that we saw in April.
Yeah, and let's be honest, Trump is kind of getting what he wants right now.
There's been
deal with the EU,
announced.
deal with the UK, deal with Japan. Like, yeah, I can't say I'm a fan of it, but he's getting what he wants. It seems. Yeah, it's remarkable, but this interest rate, I tend to think Powell's term runs out next year. Let's just assume Trump can't get rid of him. I would therefore imagine, let's assume that let's assume that Powell concludes his term next year. You got to think that whoever the incoming Fed chair is, who will be appointed by Trump, unless things are dire, which is hard, we can't see right now, then he'll put rates down. Whatever's going on, really, subject other than it being utterly dire. So interest rates. So that just suggests interest rates are coming down within, the foreseeable future.
And we may find that we're in this strange stasis until then, right? Or until something breaks. That famous saying, which who knows what it will be, but
But also Powell was late on inflation and interest rates. Then somehow managed to thread the needle and get it down without a recession. He is not going to blow that legacy by pushing to bring interest rates. It's not just his decision, bear in mind. He is not going to blow that legacy by pushing for interest rates to go down too soon.
Yeah.
So, I can see a situation where they stay here for the foreseeable, but then a new chairman is going to come in and Trump is going to make it very clear, very clear what he expects for such an appointment, I think.
That's for sure.
Yeah. But, I know we flogged this dead horse, but here we are, 7 months through the year, S&P hitting new highs, and the horror show that was earlier in the year. We won't belabor this point for once.
We're trying to get away from it.
But this is why you get the asset allocation right at the outset, you get invested, and then you stay invested. It's all you have to do. It's so hard. It's all you have to do.
Simple but not
so
easy,
hard.
right? I think that's something you mentioned.
Simple
with
but
Aiden.
not easy.
You see that segue work? It's pretty good.
Okay, yeah, right. Okay, well let's go there then. So the next segment we'll talk about. Let's review my last episode with Aiden, returning champ, back on the podcast for the 4th time.
Aiden
in live from New York City.
First of all, it's great,
Mr. Aiden Grant.
Yes, if for anyone listening on the podcast format, obviously we post these episodes in full on YouTube. So if you're a YouTube watcher, they are available there. Aiden, it was great to see the two of you together in person. That's always cool to see, and
he's great.
Quickly becoming a fan
classic,
favorite, right? Just.
Well, he's such like a classic, UK British. I mean, he's actually American as well, but a British raconteur.
And he's knowledgeable,
great value.
Obviously, and that I think that comes across very thorough and extremely knowledgeable in these areas. So we're very thankful to have him, and he always gives us a lot of content to discuss. And
the great thing is he's very, very British. But his mum's American, so he was born. I think he was actually born in America as well, and he's gone through the whole accidental American, renouncing citizenship. I'm pretty sure. So he really has done. He has walked the walk.
I wonder if that's
how
he's a
UK-US.
Do you know if that's how he got involved in the cross-border?
No, I think he was already in the. I think he was already in the cross-border world. I'm not sure. We'll have to ask him. He has told me, but I've got mixed up. So he really has lived it, and now he's a British lawyer, but he specialises in working with expats. Americans or people with an American connection, and he has his own podcast as well, UK-US podcast. So he's the perfect guy to come on. And we were talking about the UK's statutory residency test, i.e., how long you can spend in the UK without triggering being a tax resident. And if you do inadvertently or intentionally become a UK tax resident, what are some of the consequences of that?
incredibly relevant to our audience, right? I would say that the majority, we sometimes say our clients tend to be staying in the U.S., which does describe the majority, but almost all of them expect to spend some time in the UK, right? Whether a family is there or they have a home there, or any number of reasons. And then there is a not significant or insignificant portion of our client base who is going to go back to the UK or wants that option available to them, right? And wants to understand what is involved, what do they need to worry about, what do they need to be thinking about, and critically, what kind of planning needs to be undertaken to avoid the most sort of onerous impact of becoming a UK tax resident again in retirement.
Yeah, we have this right now, don't we? We have some clients who are looking to go back permanently, or we have some clients who are looking to go back temporarily with a view to maybe permanent TBD, and we have plenty of clients who intend to buy a house in the UK and split their time, not realizing that creates connecting factors, which reduces the days they can spend there. You got to be really careful with this. So I think some people just think, oh, it's 183 days, and it's not. That's one part of the rule. There's a lot more to it than that. And then it's different by every country. So you got to, if you're thinking, I'm not going to the UK, but I want to go to France. I think lots of Americans are eyeing up France right now with good reason. You've got to be careful of how long you spend, what their rules are regarding residency. And one of the great one, something you got to be so careful with the UK is if you inadvertently trigger residency in the UK, it's then for the entire tax year. So if you could inadvertently trigger residency towards the end of the tax year, but it's then backdated all the way to the beginning. So any transactions that you did early, while you were very much a US resident, subject only to US tax, could retroactively get pulled into the UK net as well. So you've got to be really careful.
That point, we should say, so again, another thing that I guess arguably some of these rules are simple but not easy to understand. They're black and white, some of these rules, right, that Aiden describes. And if you want to get the real detailed deep dive, Aiden does a fantastic job. So we're going to kind of summarize this. But something you just mentioned there reminded me when I was listening about this idea of protections that are in place but need to be invoked or need to be reported. So in this case in particular for HMRC, the default position is that they backdate to the beginning of the tax year, right? So there are protections there where you can, to me, it sounds like you can essentially petition or report that actually, no, I was a split year resident, right? You come in September, I think was the example given for the kids to start school there. You can then go ahead and tell HMRC, I started my residency in September 1st of this year, and protect yourself that way. But that is not the default assumption, right? HMRC doesn't just say, oh, okay, they probably came in the middle of the year and they're good to go. The default assumption is that it's going to backdate to April 6th of that tax year, and potentially getting you into some trouble depending on what kind of transactions were undertaken, in that kind of time slot there. I thought that was very interesting that we see those kind of behaviors from the IRS. We see those kind of more harsh assumptions, call it, but they do exist in the UK and HMRC as well, and you have to be aware of them.
Imagine moving between either of these countries with assets, with affairs. If you're a 25-year-old who's got nothing, I can completely understand it, right? But if you're a 55-year-old with a few million, just imagine moving without taking tax and immigration advice. Like, just maybe it'll be okay, maybe, but in reality, you will probably detonate some sort of a landmine.
You do not want to roll that dice.
And this is, gosh, no. And this is before you even get into there are real arbitrage opportunities. The one that immediately springs to mind going from the US to the UK is Roth conversions, especially if you're in a low tax state like Texas or Florida, no tax state, I should say. Roth conversions can be a massive arbitrage opportunity for you. So there's opportunities, but putting that to one side, that you can really, really, inadvertently mess up moving without taking advice.
Yeah. It goes back to the points we made earlier, where you do not want that hanging over your head.
Well, that's the Isaac. That the guy, coming to America with the Isaac. That's a classic. But there's loads more, and there's loads going the other way as well.
And more and more common, I think we're seeing, certainly amongst our clients, moving back or.
Oh yeah. I mean, look, we're seeing we're talking to more people who are looking to go back. There isn't. I don't know if there's an exodus yet of Americans going to Europe, but there is certainly an enormous increase in requests for information, in research being done, that I suspect is already turning into an exodus or is on its way to it. There's a variety of factors. It's not purely political, but that's a big part of it. But the interest in moving abroad is spiking,
and we're seeing it. Yeah, it is apparent.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Just to highlight one other thing here that we didn't specifically call out, but inheritance tax, obviously in the UK, which is an enormous part of your discussion with Aiden. If you do trip up these rules, and again, we won't get into the specifics of what they are, but if you do, there is a chance that HMRC will be going after your worldwide assets for inheritance tax, which we know is much higher, obviously, than the US, and the exemption rate or exclusion rate or nil ban rate is much lower.
Yeah, no. So it's not, no, the inheritance tax is the same level, 40%, or it's estate tax. It's that nil rate band that you're referring to. In the US, it's like 15 million or something. In the UK, it's £340,000. Everything after that, yeah, okay, you might be able to inherit a nil rate band from your wife, that kind of thing. But broadly,
ceiling is much
everything
lower.
above 300, it is going to get taxed at 40%.
Yeah.
Worldwide, people.
So that is critical. I mean, you do not want that bomb being left there for your heirs.
No. Okay. Anything else?
One piece I thought was interesting, if we kind of step back from the technical area of the discussion. I think you had asked Aiden, and this will tie into some of the earlier points, are clients surprised by the complexity? And I think he answered surprisingly somewhat. The real area of confusion from clients he works with or the people that he's speaking with is that there is such wide-reaching and persistent gray areas in all of these things. I think, and he had a great way of wording it, but I think the assumption is something like, and we see this, right, in our own kind of domains, the financial planning, some of the tax optimization pieces, but people come to us expecting there to be crystal clear answers on all of these things.
Yes or no.
On yes or no. On how does this interact in the US with the UK? How does this interact in the UK with the US? And the unfortunate answer, and sometimes people get really reluctant or almost angry in some ways, or dismissive.
This aggravates people.
It is aggravating. Yeah.
This actually aggravates
that
people.
Many times in this space, and part of why we do what we do is that there is gray areas to navigate. There are many areas where there is not going to be a yes or no. It's going to be pros and cons of different paths forward. And where are you comfortable, and where do you understand what kind of the paths are to resolve or plan for these things? I thought that was a really telling point, because it's interesting to see Aiden, in his domain, and hearing very similar assumptions, concerns, frustrations from his client base as the conversations we have, day in, day out.
I guess it's kind of gratifying. Look, human beings, all of us, we crave certainty, and we live in a grey area. We live in between, and when you think about it, it actually makes sense. Congress sets laws for American products and stuff, and there are grey areas there. And because there's like nearly 400 million people here, they get settled in court pretty quickly. HMRC, the UK government, Parliament sets laws for UK and UK products, and then if there's grey areas, it gets settled in court pretty quickly, because there's also however many million people in the UK. We live a lot of the time by the tax treaty, and the tax treaty, it has vague categories. It doesn't deal with stuff usually by name, so that creates loads of grey areas. And because there's far fewer people affected, it's far fewer likely to go to court and get settled. Although when it does, that's welcome. So we live in this grey area where you can ask a simple question and there can be different answers and no conclusive answer. And it's literally, it depends, and it depends how you want to file it, how you want to treat it, the risks you want to take, the steps you want to take, and that frustrates people. It is frustrating, but it is also reality.
So part of, if we can do anything with these episodes, and that will become a theme, and I'm sure it has been, is there's almost 2 steps to resolving some of these things or planning for some of them. It's getting over that initial hump of there is not an answer, and then coming to terms of, okay, like you said, it depends. Here's pros and cons of each of these approaches.
And frankly, sometimes that works in your favor.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a position to be taken. It's a legit position.
Absolutely.
And the fact that it's not settled and there is a grey area means you
There's
can take it.
opportunities.
That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Opportunities. There are, folks. And that's why I know I'm biased, but paying for good advisors in this area should more than pay for itself. It will pay for itself in landmines dodged. I believe it will pay for itself in opportunities taken, and this is without any of the emotional benefits of working with people, knowing that it's taken care of, and if it's not, you can point the finger at people who were helping you.
Absolutely.
Okay. Pick a mix. What are you reading?
You know what? I had a bit of an echo of the last episode we had done. We got into some dinosaur talk, I think, which made me seek out. Yeah. Right. I'm a real fan of these. I don't know what you would call this genre of nonfiction, but almost like a micro history. So there's a book out there called The Dinosaur Hunters by a writer, Deborah Cadbury, who I take it has written some of these sort of micro histories. But it is a fascinating look at essentially the origins of paleontology, the discovery of dinosaurs in the 19th century, which, reading this, you kind of just assume, yes,
recent.
Very recent,
yes. So when the Declaration of Independence was signed, they had no idea that dinosaurs would roam the earth.
It's hard to it's hard to
really is, isn't it?
And a lot of the discussion in the book, so it really centers on the story, a rivalry of 2 scientists in this area, a gentleman Gideon Martell and another guy Richard Owen, who wound up, there was a lot of politics and intrigue behind this fascinating read. He wound up getting a lot of the credit, and maybe he didn't deserve so much of it. But it's so interesting to think that, this is less than 200 years ago, and a lot of the science was driven by not, what we would think of as a modern scientific process, but more about, what religious texts were saying or how to approach these things to fit a certain narrative. So I found that part really, really interesting.
Right, yeah. Jim, did I get that right? 1776 was Declaration of Independence. So had they discovered dinosaurs by then? Or?
No. They
no. Okay.
So this term dinosauria, which I think was coined by this Richard Owen, they started to look at these as separate species. It was like 1820s, I want to say 1830s, and it's pretty.
I've never thought that. How I bet people were then accusing them of being heretics. Right? It literally just heretic. I can imagine it causing all sorts.
It
of
was
trouble.
like a decades-long furor, not only about what these creatures were and what was this some kind of step in the evolutionary ladder to the ultimate pinnacle of mankind, as we all know we are, but also the age of the planet. So there was no radiotopic aging, right? The assumption from the book, essentially that it's 4,000 years old. And when you're uncovering fossils that are clearly sediments in the rock layers that obviously make the planet much older than that, it led to a lot of big questions and a lot of pushback from certain sectors of society. So really interesting. Very, very, very engaging too. Quick read.
So when I was young, obviously I was into dinosaurs like every kid, and then you grow out of it. And then I've now got kids, and they're really into dinosaurs. And I've got to tell you, as an adult, it's fascinating.
I love it. It's funny because
absolutely. So this is a while ago, but I'd completely forgotten about. I don't even know if I ever knew it. But you've heard of the Katy boundary?
Is that when the essentially the asteroid hit and it transferred from? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So the asteroid hit. It sent this huge cloud of. The reason everyone died. All creatures died. Well, the vast majority of creatures died is because asteroid hit in just off California or Mexican California, and a lot of animals were killed immediately in the fallout from that and the tsunami. But it sent this huge cloud of ash into the sky that basically went around the world and blocked out the entire skies, choked out the sunlight, and everyone basically asphyxiated, I believe, or starved. And when this ash came to ground, it's settled over the entire Earth, and then new life sprung up on top of it, and they call this the Katy boundary, and it's a few inches thick. But there's places in Colorado you can go or Utah, I'm not even sure where, but you can literally see in the stone where you can see the Katy boundary, and below that is pre-dinosaurs, and above it is post-dinosaurs, and I just found that unbelievably fascinating.
The idea of this sort of apocalyptic global event, there is some level, I mean, it's fascinating, right, that the forces involved, and the other thing that struck me in that discussion, we talk about 200 years, right, the ecological timescales involved. Like, you can say, okay, the last dinosaurs, KT boundary was 65 million years ago. Well, dinosaurs had already been around for hundreds of millions of years at that point. So it's trying to wrap your head around the timescales involved. It's just
I love the period of the fall of the Roman Republic, like the end of the Republic and the start of the Empire. So Caesar's time and the last 100 years. It's 2,100 years ago. That is nothing. Like the recent history is so.
It's a blink.
It's a blink of an eye. It's not even a blink of an eye. It's kind of it's impossible to actually wrap your head around.
Yeah, you can't. It's they'll sometimes do those metaphors of like if in a 24-hour day, if the history of the Earth was 24 hours, humans would be the last millisecond and even those metaphors fall short of what is truly an incredibly long span of time.
I don't want to be super negative, but also think about the damage we've done in that time as well. Yeah.
So I promise I'll get off dinosaurs for next episode, but I wanted to tie that because that was directly inspired by our Jurassic Park.
You gave me an opportunity to talk about the Katy boundary, and I'll take any opportunity I can to talk about the Katy boundary. It's still relatively new to me. I find it fascinating. I want to see it. I'm reading Team of Rivals, a famous book from I think it's about 20 years old now, about Lincoln and how he won the Republican nomination against much better known and more experienced rivals, Seward, Salmon Chase, and Edward Bates. And then I'm partway through. I assume it then how he then took those rivals and incorporated them into his cabinet. And it's just I can see why it's so popular. It's fantastically written. It's a fascinating insight into these four players. I find Lincoln endlessly fascinating.
It really is.
It's just, and I think the reason being is we have all these great men of history, and you learn about Caesar and Napoleon, and these were like outstanding humans, particularly Caesar. They really were exceptional, and Lincoln was in many ways, but also in some ways he wasn't. Like obviously his appearance and his demeanor, and he also came from a very inauspicious background. And I think the other thing with Lincoln is he was undeniably great, but I think he was also undeniably good. Not perfect, right? So I know there's some people take umbrage with some of his earlier. He wasn't vehemently against slavery. He was, but he wasn't like outlaw it in every single territory or state from the get-go. It's a kind of a progression, and there's some other stuff as well. But he was, I think he was undeniably a good man, and we don't often associate people at the very, very top with being good, and I think that's another reason why history is so obsessed with him.
He's a fascinating figure.
He was a great leader, and he was a good man.
That it's funny you say that. I had been gifted that book probably when it came out, thinking if it was 20 years ago, and I bounced off it. I might have been a bit too young at that stage, but I should revisit that. I know that's held up as one of the sort of definitive recountings of that era.
Yeah, great. And as we wrap up, I'll also offer, I'm a Dan Snow fanboy. Anyone who loves History podcast, there's a History Hit podcast from the UK run by this guy called Dan Snow, and I think he's great. And they recently did a 10-year celebration, and they've revisited the first episode from 2015, cleaned it up a little bit, and it's him and his dad, and British people will recognise his dad, Peter Snow, and they talk about the Battle of Waterloo. And that's a fascinating battle, narrated or talked through by two people who are obviously love the subject, have a wealth of knowledge, have father-son
That's
banter and back and forths, and I'd suggest people go and find that episode and give it a listen.
Cool. Awesome. Good. Well, I think that's this week's From the Trenches, right? We should preview who's coming up next. Is it...
I think it's Virginia. I think it's the talk I had with Virginia the other week, talking about statute of limitations, how missing these offshore forms for non-US bank accounts, retirement accounts, investment accounts, missing any one of a plethora of these forms can leave the statute of limitations open indefinitely, and the repercussions that can result from
Good,
that.
excellent. So if our starting conversation today about PFICs and all those good things resonated, make sure you tune in for Virginia's episode, next episode. And obviously, I mentioned this, but we want this to be a dialogue. Our email address is james@planfirstwealth, richard@planfirstwealth. Send us feedback. Want to hear if you're enjoying it. And obviously, if you are, follow us wherever you're listening to the podcast. Follow us on YouTube. We always appreciate that.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.
Speak soon.
Thanks.